17 witnesses who will present their evidence from that very table there, to be asked questions by prosecutors sitting there. I will be prosecuting, Payam will be prosecuting, Sir Geoffrey Nice will be prosecuting, and others as well, whose names will be available to you. But our role is simply and will be to elicit the stories of the witnesses, so that once and for all they can be recorded, logged, and proven, and to be taken further. What happens after this tribunal, we don't know. Where matters go, we don't know. But what we can say in conclusion is that we have gathered together the services of eminent individuals to sit as judges on this tribunal. Peoples whose credentials are completely unimpeachable. People whose credentials are that of honesty, dignity, and integrity. Credentials which sweep through that of the prosecution as well. We are here simply for the story to be told. And once that story is told, it will be for others to decide what the next step will be. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Further to what my esteemed colleague, Mr. Cooper, has said, I just want to make some brief remarks. I think the first point is to recognize that this is the initiative of the families of the victims and the survivors of these atrocities. And it's a remarkable and unprecedented historical undertaking for a number of reasons. For one thing, this is a situation where the victims refuse to be victims. They are showing that they will never forget, they will never surrender their struggle for justice, that 20 years, 30 years later, the violence of the regime cannot silence their cries for justice. And this is also, I believe, a triumph of the human spirit. It shows that when you trample on people's dignity for want of power, that you will not be able to succeed in the end. People will come back, they will never forget. And this is a very important message at a time when Iran is going through such a complex transition, when people have to understand that the change that we need in Iran is not simply replacing one group of tyrants with another group of tyrants, but it is a radical transformation of our political culture. A culture of violence, tyranny, and deception must be replaced by a culture founded on respect for human rights, the rule of law, and the beginning of that culture is for the people of Iran, in solidarity with the international community, to send the message to the leaders of the Islamic Republic today and to whoever may be in power tomorrow that they are accountable to the people for human rights violations. And until the people of Iran, in solidarity with the world community, can send that message, we cannot build a better future in Iran. So this initiative, while it looks at the past, is really about building the future. And I just want to recognize in particular that all of the people involved in this initiative have volunteered their time, their resources. It is a truly grassroots initiative. I'm particularly grateful for my colleagues such as John Cooper, Judge Krieger, and really eminent jurists who have exceedingly busy schedules, who have given a tremendous amount of their time simply to stand in solidarity with the human rights struggle of the Iranians. And I would really like to recognize that gratefully. And one final point which is interesting, I have been involved with the United Nations War Crimes Tribunal, with the International Court of Justice right behind us here, and I have never seen a situation where people have a truth commission in exile where people have transitional justice before the transition. So what we have to understand is that although people parallel this with the Russell Tribunal of 1966, which was looking into America's role in the Vietnam War, this to me is far more important because it is a grassroots indigenous initiative, which at the same time has international dimensions. And I hope that it will only be the first step in a much longer struggle to create a political culture in which those responsible for these crimes will be held accountable. And through what we're doing today, we are in effect hastening the day when we will have a democratic Iran founded on respect for human rights and the rule of law. Thank you.
I'm going to, as others will of course speak and make a contribution, but instead of simply going down the line, this is a conference and by definition it's a two-way process. So I'm going to open it up for questions now and invite other colleagues on the table to deal with those questions as appropriate. So I wonder if you are going to ask some questions, which I hope you are, raise your hands and also explain who you are, and if you are associated with any organisation, tell us what it is, please. Or have we stunned you into silence? Oh, Sir Geoffrey has just arrived. Would you like to come and... no, with a very nutty white scarf, I see. But Sir Geoffrey, who I mentioned a moment ago in his absence as one of the key prosecutors, has just stepped through the door. So that's three of us, and I think there are others in the room as well, I know. All right. I just need some questions from you. Any questions? All right. What's the weather going to be like? Or is it clear? Thank you.
When are you going to start working after these days are over? Are you going to start working, or are you already starting to work, or is the
Work in what capacity? What do you mean?
collecting the witnesses?
Yes. Hamid, maybe you can deal with that, and then I'll go along the table if anyone wants to contribute.
The tribunal will hear some 19 witnesses. They will also receive the report of the Truth Commission, and at the end of the hearing, which is on Saturday, then the judges would have a deliberation session, and if it is possible at that time, they will issue an interim or preliminary judgment, and a full judgment will then be issued within 45 days or 60 days after that. But they have first to hear the evidence before they can make a judgment.
Thank you. We're trying to keep the proceedings as forensic and legalistic as we can. The Republic were invited to send a representative, I should say, but that's not happened. And another question.
I just wanted to make it clear for others who ask. So you have a final verdict for 45 days after the hearings in last year's?
It is the aim to produce it as soon as possible, and hopefully it will be within 45 days, depending on the busy schedule of all the judges that we have.
Can you speak up about this? People at the back can't hear.
Can you hear me now? Yes.
For those of you that can't wait for that, can I suggest you read the Commission's report?
I could add, I'm one of the judges. We have not yet met. We have not yet determined a work program. 45 days, I would think, is a good estimate, but we come from all over the world. We will have to consult with one another on the draft, and we will produce it as soon as is humanly possible. We realize that it is of importance to make it known to the world and to the people of Iran as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, gentleman at the front. Could you just explain your name and where you come from, sir? Thank you. Yes. Yes, we did. We wrote a letter which I signed as chairman of the Legal Steering Committee, inviting them to attend, because this is a forensic process and we want to abide by forensic protocols. But as far as I'm aware, we didn't get a reply. Hamid, is that right?
That's correct. There was no reaction, no response, no acknowledgement from the government of Iran.
Anything else? Is there a lady with... I beg your pardon, yes. Yes. By all means. How do you want to deal with that? The selection process of witnesses?
I actually, yes. Yes, the question is regarding the selection process for the witnesses, and of course there were about 80 witnesses at the London phase and just under 20 at this phase. So we have about a total of 100 witnesses, and I would say the organizing committee had a very important role to play in guiding the steering committee in that selection process, given that these are individuals that for the past 20 or 25 years have had very close ties to that community, which is now spread across the world. And it's a real challenge to be able to identify the appropriate people and to ensure both that those people are representative of a broad cross-section of the victim community. And I think one of the great successes of this tribunal is that you do not see victims simply from this or that political group or this or that ethnic or religious group. We truly have a very diverse victim population. And that's the central message here, that it doesn't matter what your political or religious or ethnic or other origin is. A victim is a victim. Every human being has rights. And that's the central message, I think, of this tribunal and the whole notion of the rule of law.
I'll add a little detail to that as well in terms of witnesses. We've endeavoured to ensure that the witnesses who give evidence to the tribunal are different on the whole, if not in totality, but certainly on the whole, with the witnesses who gave evidence to the Commission. Because the witnesses who gave evidence to the Commission in London in June have had their evidence enshrined in the Commission report. Now, I will be presenting that Commission report to the judges tomorrow, asking them to adopt it as findings of fact, effectively to utilise the evidence of witnesses at the Commission as evidence before this tribunal. As well as witnesses before this tribunal as to fact, if one can put it that way, we also have a series of expert witnesses who are going to give some background expertise upon this period and upon certain issues relating to this period. And we also have Maurice Copperthorne, who I know sits in with us today, who is giving evidence in this case, which is the link, as it were, between this tribunal and indeed Maurice, who was a commissioner at the Commission in London in June. So it's as wide-ranging as we could possibly make it, but of its nature, there had to be a selection process because we'd have been here longer than I think we'd have been welcome to be here had we not made that selection process. But overall, we hope that the witnesses, the 75 or 80 or so heard in London, and then 18 or 19 or so that will be heard during this procedure, will present a broad cross-section of all the issues we seek to raise. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah, yeah. You haven't actually said who you are. I know who you are, but let's not be too intimate about it. Can you say who you are and where you're from, as it were? I'll start again, then I'll go down the line. As I've indicated before, we've been, certainly initially, it might have improved and others can bring us up to speed, but initially the United Nations showed little interest, and I'm not going to mince my words. One of the reasons 2 years ago, one of the catalysts for this whole procedure, as far as the victims and the bereaved were concerned, was the United Nations inability, and I use the word advisedly. I'm not necessarily saying they didn't necessarily want to, and there weren't some people there that wanted to get in this issue, but their inability, for various reasons, to do anything about it. But there are other human rights organisations that have been very supportive. Amnesty International, for instance, provided the venue for the Commission, and Amnesty London were particularly very supportive over this. I'm a trustee, and Sir Geoffrey is a patron of Prisoners of Conscience in London, and it was through that organisation that I got involved because of my work on Prisoners of Conscience, and as I say, Sir Geoffrey is a patron of that organisation. So there are links there with certain human rights groups. There are others who haven't necessarily, to use the expression, come up to the plate. But I don't want to get too controversial or divisive at this stage.
Another question regarding the same subject. How can any of the judges individually put any pressure on those international movements or
I'll hand that over.
UN or other groups? Is it possible for you individually to put pressure on them?
Does anyone else want to take that point? I don't want to...
The question is directed.
The question was directed to a judge, wasn't it? So.
I have no mandate to speak on behalf of my colleagues. I can express my own view, which may change, having spoken to my colleagues, may change, having heard the evidence that is presented and the submissions that are made. But my own view is, and I speak as a South African, coming from a society in which there were grave abuses of human rights, which were largely ignored by a significant sector of the world out there, and was largely ignored by a significant sector of the controllers of the state in South Africa at the time. And when we had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission after the transition to the new South Africa, there were many thousands of people in my country, many of my own ethnic group, who said, we never knew this. If only we had known this, if the truth had not been withheld from us. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the primary issues and one of the primary objectives in these current proceedings is so that we can say to people hereafter, never say you did not know.